yesterday against Abzan, which seemed to be a pretty decent matchup. He's against Dan Musser, who's on Abzan.
Yeah, 2 former Open Series champions. Dan Musser winning a Legacy Open with counterbalanced Gerard, a Legacy Open and a Standard Open champion. And Dan playing the most popular deck, second day of competition, Abzan. We saw Gerard play against this deck yesterday in the hands of Ben Green, who I believe is still doing well in this event. The matchup seemed solidly in Gerard's favor. A lot of similar tools between the two decks, but Gerard, a little bit more card advantage, a little bit more card drawing.
Yeah, a great game there, actually. If you ever get a chance to go through the archives, the Ben Green, Gerard Fabiano match, definitely worth a second watch.
Yeah.
Dan Musser on the play. He's going to start off with Treetop Village. Manlands, as we've seen before, a great weapon against the Sultai deck.
Definitely game 1, it's the best thing you can bring to the table against Gerard's deck, in my opinion. Treetop Village, Raging Ravine, Creeping Tar Pit. He doesn't have a lot of good answers to these cards because his removal is either Sorcery Speed or Abrupt Decay, which can't touch Manlands.
And we look at Dan's hand, it is well positioned to get into a slugfest with Gerard. Its mana is its weak spot, so he has a green mana in play. Urborg is his only other land, but right up the curve, he's got plays. Inquisition of Kozilek, Scavenging Ooze, 2 copies of Lingering Souls, and to top it all off, a Siege Rhino.
So you really can't touch the Lingering Souls in this hand, and he's so far away from Siege Rhino.
If you touch one.
Right. So I think this is a decision between Inquisition and Scavenging Ooze.
We'll see which one Gerard decides to go with here. Does he have something worth protecting? Otherwise, he can just take care of the Scavenging Ooze. But this does not seem like the kind of hand Gerard wants to see.
No, there is still hope that Dan might just miss white mana for a very long time, but this is a hand very well suited to battle an attrition battle, and with the Treetop Village in play, that's bad news for Gerard as well.
All right, Urborg into Scavenging Ooze. Dan's draw was Maelstrom Pulse, so he will be put to the test next turn to see whether or not he gets to curve out. Going back over to Gerard's side, looks like he'll have a turn 2 play of his own. But if he does hit that white mana next turn, Dan is in a great position.
Yeah, his hand's spectacular. Multiple copies of Lingering Souls, a Siege Rhino down the pipeline. Temple Garden would be ideal because he also wants the ability to activate the Treetop Village, a very potent threat against Gerard, but any white mana will do.
All right, for Gerard, it's going to go ahead and be Tarmogoyf. We have right now lands, Inquisition in the graveyard, so he'll be a 2/3. And for Dan, it looks like he hit a land, but I believe it is Vault of the Archangel that he hit.
You greedy, greedy man, Dan Musser.
That is a colorless land, so could do worse, but...
Not much worse.
Not much. Well,
as far as land.
He can cast Maelstrom Pulse.
Yeah.
But you're right, he does need white mana at this point. Maelstrom Pulse will take care of Tarmogoyf. Scavenging Ooze will swing in for 2 damage. Gerard goes down to 16. Back over to him. It's going to be a Serum Visions. Some of the advantages here with Sultai when you compare it to Abzan. These black-green decks, the blue splash allows Gerard to play things like this Serum Visions here.
Right.
Which really will help him if the game turns into a slugfest.
He's got 1 copy of Compulsive Research to boot.
Does Dan hit the white mana? Draw for the turn? I do not believe so. Looks like he may have picked up a copy of Tassiger the Golden Fang. He's 1 mana off playing that right now.
Yeah, 2 copies on the list.
And look at this play here. It's really aggressive. He is swinging. If Gerard blocks, he can make the Tassiger. He's going to go ahead and... Wouldn't block, though. He's going to go ahead and eat the creature. That puts moves up to a 3/3. Yeah, it's Charmwave down to a 2/3. So just a stronger play there.
Yeah, on the table, it's not a block that Gerard can make, so.
Not without more creatures. Charmwave will go ahead and swing for 2 here from Gerard as he plays a 4th land. No other plays just yet. Dan dropping the turn, hoping to hit a white mana, but instead he hits a white spell. It's Path to Exile.
Perfect.
Scavenging Ooze swinging in. It's currently a 3/3. And Gerard looking like he's going to have something to say about that.
Vault of the Archangels in play, hanging out, reminding Dan that there are, in fact, consequences for actions.
Hey, we're not sure that the land that would replace it would have been white.
No, we don't.
Maybe it's...
No, we don't. Maybe it's a Tectonic Edge instead. You know, I get what you're saying. Just right now, does not look great.
Hey, Gerard with no response there. He's going to go to 9 off that hit. He actually just fetches on end step. So he's definitely down on life points, but is very far ahead on the board.
And I think he's about to make it all up with one of his Thrag Tusks.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen the Gerard deck yet, it has a huge payoff in 2 copies of Tasker, and as you mentioned, those 2 copies of Thrag Tusk. Thrag Tusk card that's very hard. It's going to always be a 2-for-1 against a deck like Abzan, and oftentimes a 3-for-1.
Right. Right. And also a way to win the game. Not just a source of raw card advantage, but just good numbers all around.
And there we go. 5 life brings Gerard back up to 13. And it's interesting. This is really, we haven't seen anyone other than Gerard play Thragtusk just fairly for value in Modern.
I mean, we see it hang out in sideboard sometimes when you want, an attrition-based matchup or you want a little bit of life gain, but having it in the main deck as just part of your principal plan, we don't see very much of that.
Twilight Mire's the dropper Dan, so still no white mana, but it is land number 4, which helps him delve and cast this Tassiger the Golden Fang in his hand. Does have 4 mana to maybe activate it next turn, though with such a full grip from Gerard, you have to wonder whether or not it's going to get killed.
Yep. Gerard's been sitting on quite a number of cards here for a while.
Dark Six Shores, and here is a Maelstrom Pulse. That'll take care of Tassiger for Gerard. Puts a creature back in the graveyard, and here comes an attack. Tarmogoyf now 3/4. It can attack. Thragtusk will join the fight. That's 8 damage coming across. Dan drops down to 9. Still missing that white mana. The hand that we said was so good in the matchup. Its only weakness, no white, really coming back to bite Dan.
Yeah, Dan's gotten quite unfortunate over these draw steps.
Yeah, I mean, the strength of his hand is so good that you have to keep it and just, it's very reasonable to say they keep it, take the risk. Dan did, and the risk didn't pay.
Absolutely. I mean, Treetop Village is one of the better cards in the matchup, too. It wasn't just he kept 2 lands. He kept one of his better lands in the matchup. And Gerard's deck's not particularly fast, so you have a lot of draw steps to find white mana. Just didn't shake out the right way for Dan this game.
Another attack from Gerard. At this point, where I think there's a debate as to whether or not, let's see, Scavenging Ooze will go ahead and eat a creature, make it up to 4. He could activate Treetop Village as well. He's going to go ahead and do that. And actually, he's on the attack. So Scavenging Ooze is a 4/4. It swings in. Treetop a 3/3. Gerard goes down to 6.
Yeah, Dan can't really block, so he might as well attack. He's not facing lethal on the way back.
Yeah, he does have a Siege Rhino in hand. So you want to think, if you hit the white, what is the best thing that you can do?
Sort of the mentality is, let's assume that the top card of my deck is white mana and Gerard's hand has nothing. What's my best play? Because that's probably what's got to happen for Dan to win this game.
Down to 3. It is a land of some sort from Dan. Don't know if it makes white just yet.
It's a Verdant Catacomb, which he cannot get white mana with without killing himself. So
He sure is at 3.
yet another perfect draw.
Right on time for the for the fetch land. So on the turn, he finally finds a source of white. He cannot use it, and that may spell doom for Dan Musser. Here's the Catacombs.
I mean, Dan can try to block out of this turn, go get a land tapped with the Verdant Catacombs, and hope that Siege Rhino can pull him back into the game. So he's not necessarily dead right now, but he's in a lot of trouble.
Is only a 2/3, so he could block. He could even take that would be a pretty big risk. Yeah, so he'd go to 2 off the fetch. So you'd have to block with Treetop and Scavenging Ooze.
Yep.
And then hope that next turn, his white cards really carry the day for him.
Yeah, I mean, the following turn, if he draws a land, he can say play Lingering Souls with Flashback, which allows him to chump block and maybe get to Siege Rhino. So it's not quite done yet for Dan. He's definitely in trouble, but he may be able to work his way out of this turn. This all assumes Gerard has basically nothing of action in his hand. He can't beat anything of substance, but if Gerard's hand is really nothing, Dan can keep playing.
Treetop Village swings. Dan's going to go ahead and attack. Decides that what he wants his out to be is there a lethal attack? And add that activated creatures. Gerard's going to use Cryptic Command to tap the team. That should be strong enough to win the game, and it is. Game 1 over for Gerard Fabiano.
And Gerard's deck, this is the recipe we've seen against Abzan. His deck is a lot of the same tools, but just a little bit bigger, a little bit more powerful. You see cards like Thragtusk and Cryptic Command. And those are the little places where he gets an edge to overpower in the matchup, where there's a lot of the same tools bouncing off of each other.
Go ahead and get ready for game 2. Go ahead and look at the sideboard. So Dan's going to have to go bigger and hit harder. What are his options to do that?
Dan has 4 copies of Fulminator Mage, 3 copies of Stone of Silence, 2 copies of Feed the Clans, 2 copies of Sorin Solemn Visitor, a Timely Reinforcements, a Zealous Persecution, a Battered Skull, and Disfigure. I like sort of just adding some more generic power and attrition to the deck. The Battered Skull, the 2 copies of Sorin, and the 4 copies of Fulminator Mage. Gerard's deck, a lot of non-basics and I think Stone Rain of Tears sort of effect is okay for him in the matchup.
Yeah, we have seen this matchup previously for Gerard. Things that he boarded in last time and I expect him to repeat. Fulminator Mages, yes. Knight of Souls Betrayal, a great answer to Lingering Souls. Has a copy of Sower of Temptation, as well as more copies of Damnation, Disfigure, and a Vendilion Click.
Right, and it's the same recipe on Gerard's side of the table. Just go a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger in a matchup that's basically about outlasting the other player.
So we were talking earlier about how there's only one Open between now and the Invitational, wondering why that would be. That's because next week there's not a Star City Open. There's a Grand Prix, and that's going to be Grand Prix Miami. We've been talking about it so much. You and Cedric are going to make a trip down to South Beach here to cover this one. This is March 6th through 8th, so next week in Miami.
Should be a lot of fun. Standard Grand Prix. Last time we were in Miami to cover our Grand Prix, we had a ton of excellent matches. A lot of great stuff to do, and Miami is just a very fun city to go out in. So I highly recommend attending this tournament and pre-registering if you aren't already registered.
Yeah, that's, remember, Grand Prix Miami, hosted by Star City Games. That's next weekend. So we have this mid-range mirror here. Sultai control, almost a mid-range style control deck. And Abzan just really does become a slugfest, though, after sideboard. Both players trying to go for even more powerful cards.
Yeah, and Gerard having access to Fulminator Mage, which is good in a variety of matchups, but also cleans up some of his vulnerability to man lands. He just has more answers to Treetop Village and Stirring Wildwoods and Raging Ravines. And these cards, probably more than any other card he's going to see in Game 1, causes his deck some trouble. So having access to more answers is very good for him.
And I think he really wants to in this matchup, let his Cryptic Commands shine. That seems to be a card that really pulls him ahead. Dan doesn't really have a card on that kind of power level.
Exactly. It's just something that's generically good, kind of no matter what the game looks like. Very potent if he draws multiple copies. Good when Gerard's ahead. Good when Gerard's behind. And yeah, as you mentioned, Dan not really with any sort of analog in his deck.
Yeah, his big payoff spell is both something like Lingering Souls or Siege Rhino, but those are a lot more answerable. Dan's basic answer to Cryptic is Thoughtseize.
It's not like Siege Rhino is a bad Magic card by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not fair to compare it to Cryptic Command in the way that this game's going to go.
Well, we're underway Game 2. Dan Musser on the play again. He's going to start with Stirring Wildwood. We go back over to Gerard. A lot of setup in his hand. He has Maelstrom Pulse, Serum Visions, a fair number of lands, so it looks like he'll be able to survive through the early game, but needs to find some pressure of his own for later. He'll start with Verdant Catacombs. And the pressure's really on Dan to get the threats on the board here.
He's the beatdown in this matchup. Now, Dan does have some tools that allow him to go long with Gerard, Lingering Souls most notably, Tassiger as well, but I think that he would prefer to play a short game in this matchup rather than a long one.
Turn 2 is going to be a fetch over in Catacombs, setting Dan up for a 2-drop. Looks like he does have a copy of Scavenging Ooze in his hand. Did a lot of work last game against Gerard's copy of Tarmogoyf. Maybe he'll be able to do more this game. You see Dan with all 3 colors this game, so he will have access to the full set of spells.
Yeah, just a much better start here. All 3 colors of mana and still with a man land to pair with it.
It's going to be Tarmogoyf on turn 2 for Dan. Had his choice of 2-drops. 2C for Gerard. Damnation, he does have 2 in the main. He's shuffling through there. 3rd one in the board, all pretty good against Abzan.
Yep. And again, just another way to win the slugfest.
Go over to Gerard. We see a group looking like it has a pair of Abrupt Decays here. And one thing I want to point out is how Gerard's using his Serum Visions. He's had one since turn 1, but still really isn't casting it. Seems like he doesn't really need anything just yet.
Yeah, he's still waiting for more information. Also, with the amount of shuffling that he has going on in his hand with all of his fetch lands, he might be better served just getting those out of the way and then using his scry effects, so he isn't in a spot where he's shuffling in a bunch of dead cards that he doesn't want.
Dan playing a pre-combat Scavenging Ooze. The idea is that if Gerard's only answer to Ooze is something like Mana Leak, Dan would like to get those in the graveyard before he attacks with Tarmogoyf. Gerard, though, will let it resolve. He's going to go ahead and now the 1-2 Tarmogoyf will swing in. We'll see if Gerard wants to make a play.
Seems like a fine spot to Abrupt Decay, and I think Gerard is going through his deck looking for a swamp to do exactly that.
Kind of both options pretty decent, right? He can Abrupt Decay here because Tarmogoyf is a threat. At the same time, it's just a 1-2, so if he wants to wait on that, that's also reasonable. But he will just Abrupt Decay the attacker. Dan with land 3. It's a second copy of Stirring Wildwood, and they'll throw back. And for Gerard, the power starts to come into play. Cryptic Command was his draw for the turn. And now he will finally use his Serum Visions.
And with a lot of the shuffling out of the way. So his scries to the bottom now are much more effective.
Believe his draw a copy of, well, kind of Gerard's. The card he's well known for, it's going to be Ashiok Nightmare Weaver.
And probably a pretty solid card in this matchup. Dan with a lot of cheap and impactful creatures. Not great at attacking planeswalkers given Gerard's plethora of removal. And if Dan wants to spend his entire turn turning on something like Treetop Village or Stirring Wildwood to go after Ashiok, that's a victory for Gerard as well.
Gerard leaving up 2 mana. He does have another copy of Abrupt Decay in hand. Same time, one of the tests you mentioned for Gerard is that his deck is somewhat soft to man lands, and Dan with both 2 Stirring Wildwoods may be able to get some extra pressure there. But in the meantime, here comes Scavenging Ooze, just as a 2/2. Dan not going to invest any mana in pumping it. Going to let Gerard attempt to Abrupt Decay, but here's a 1-of out of Dan's spell. It's a 1-of Restoration Angel to actually save his Ooze.
Yeah, this is a card that used to see a lot more modern play back when Birthing Pod was part of the format. Still very potent in any sort of creature matchup or something where your opponent's packing a lot of removal. Only 1 copy in Dan's list, but very well timed. Putting pressure on Gerard to find his damnations.
Yeah, so now a lot of creatures in play. Dan having a 3/4 Angel, the 2/2 Scavenging Ooze, and the access to these man lands. It's a lot of damage he's presenting. Gerard's deck very good at killing things, but you're right, outside the damnation, he doesn't really have sweepers, so he just has to pay face value for all this removal.
And it's possible that Restoration Angel was just not something on Gerard's radar. That he was hoping that Dan would dump some mana pumping his Scavenging Ooze, and then the Abrupt Decay would be even more effective. You don't see Restoration Angel in this deck very often. That's the first time we've seen it the entire weekend.
Yeah, Gerard could have main phased the Abrupt Decay, for example.
Caught him off guard, and Restoration Angel was just excellent.
And swing for 5 now from Musser. Gerard opting not to cast a Maelstrom Pulse that turn, actually. Instead of holding up Cryptic Command. Dan doesn't look like he'll have much of that, though. I think after post-attack, he's just going to pass the turn.
Yeah, no reason to move, and Gerard not doing anything, probably indicating, there's Cryptic Command. He might be trying to set up some sort of sweeper. Dan's got a nice board presence right now. A lot of pressure. He can attack Gerard's graveyard if Gerard's trying to do something with that, like Snapcaster Mage, for example. So no real incentive for Dan to advance his board much beyond what he has right now. Force Gerard to come up with some sort of answer.
An aggressive end-step play here by Gerard. He's going to end-step fetch and for a shock land, taking 3 more so that he can bounce the Scavenging Ooze and draw a card.
I believe Gerard only has 1 island in his list, so he already has it in play and has to get a Ravnica Dual land instead if he wants a Cryptic right here.
We'll see Dan could eat creatures in response. If he wanted to get very aggressive, he had a way to remove the Ooze. He could deny Gerard card draw. He's going to go ahead and eat 1 creature to gain a life. We'll take multiple creatures to gain life here.
Well, I also think he wants to just shut down the graveyard for Snapcaster Mage, and also Gerard has Tassiger in his deck, so
sure.
If there's some way to get, an easy way to get some cards out of the graveyard.
Yeah, he took the Abrupt Decays out of Gerard's graveyard, it looks like. And Gerard, this was the payoff. Jace, Architect of Thought, +1s up to 5 on Gerard's turn. And he'll play a tap land and pass back. If he wanted to set up a board where Dan couldn't just untap and kill this.
Right. And now Jace +1 means it's -1 attack for the board. Right now, Dan can only cobble together an attack with the Restoration Angel and the Stirring Wildwood, so that's only 4, meaning that Jace is safe on the board no matter what.
Yeah, that does take a lot of the wind out of Jace's sails, though. I mean, Dan may make that move anyway, because it does waste it all. Then it all accomplishes wasting Dan's turn.
This is true, but then it's the entire turn. If Gerard
Sure.
has a follow-up like Damnation or just a removal spell, Dan might just get stuck in the mud trying to get this Jace off the table.
Well, Dan with a lot of heavy hitters in his hand. His draw for the turn was Siege Rhino. It goes next to his copy of Tassiger and the Ooze that is back in his hand. A lot of good threats, but he does need to consider how fast he can cast them. Jace looming at 5 counters. Dan likely not wanting to give Gerard a chance to minus it.
I mean, you can feel the weight on Dan right now. If he's spending all of his mana attacking Jace, and Gerard has some sort of follow-up like Cryptic Command or Damnation, Dan might just fall way too far behind in this game.
Yeah, he's got to make sure he's still casting spells. See if he goes for the Wildwood play. It looks like he's thinking about it. And that will be it. Sterling Wildwood fired up as a 3-4 or not. It's close.
I mean, it's Dan's entire turn. He does not have a land to follow up with. He doesn't have enough cards in his graveyard to get Tassiger out there, so.
And it's worth it. He's going to put Jace down to 1. Both players spending the entire last turn just addressing Jace. Gerard casting it, Dan rendering it mostly ineffective. Now we're back on Gerard as Gerard returns Sunken Ruins. Jace goes up to 2. It's the only available move. Gerard does still have that copy of Maelstrom Pulse in hand. Can make Dan waste another turn if he wants to take care of the Jace.
And if Gerard has some way to add to the board as well, he can Maelstrom Pulse, have a blocker for the Stirring Wildwood.
And he's going to go for Ashiok Nightmare Weaver. That's going to mill 3 cards. One of them is a Tarmogoyf. And now Maelstrom Pulse for the Restoration Angel. So yes, the Jace can get killed this turn, but it was just a setup for Ashiok in the first place. And the draw from Dan, Lingering Souls. That is a card that is not good in the face of Jace the Architect's Thought at all.
And now we're back in the spot where it's Dan's entire turn to get the Jace off the table. Then Ashiok has the option of putting Tarmogoyf into play, freeing up the rest of Gerard's resources.
Yeah, and that's the play that Dan's going to have to make. He spends his turn again to take care of Jace. So we're back over to Gerard. Ashiok gets value as soon as it can. -2's down to 3 to make Tarmogoyf. Let's see if Gerard has more follow-up. Dan has a lot of really good tools in his hand, but just not able to cast them quick enough. Draw for the turn. That's Sorin.
Just another card that chokes Dan on mana.
Yeah, I don't see a game where I'm not convinced that Sorin will even get cast before this game is over.
I mean, this game is shaping up to potentially go on for a very long time, so possibly, but Dan's hand is definitely clawed right now.
But there's still tempo involved here, right? So Dan has, he has all these great cards, but he can't play 2 of them in a turn.
Well, he can set up something with Tassiger. That's his way to get 2 spells in a turn, because he's approaching the point where Tassiger is 1 mana.
Dan's gonna go for some Lingering Souls plays. Looks like 1 Lingering Souls, and then he can either flash it back or play Scavenging Ooze. He'll just make the flashback Army of Flyers.
Yep.
You see, Gerard has not spent any of his mana that last turn. It looks like he just will continue to not do so. Draw for the turn was Tassiger, however, on Gerard's side.
And that's on the super cheap.
Ashiok pluses up to 5. Siege Rhino, one of the cards that it milled. Dan certainly does not want to let Gerard get that one into play. However, Gerard with the tailor-made answer for the Lingering Souls. That's Knight of Souls Betrayal. All creatures get -1/-1. That will protect this Ashiok and almost very likely will result in Gerard getting to make this Siege Rhino.
Yeah, this is so brutal, again, because Dan's been spending, his mana is such a valuable resource to him right now because his hand is so choked that having his turn swallowed up like that is just horrible. And now a Lingering Souls off the top with no value.
Yeah. Dan having options here, but he's, like I said, there's going to be a Siege Rhino on the other side of the table. It just doesn't seem like he's able to play his cards quick enough.
Yeah. It's funny to say someone is land screwed with 5 lands in play, but Dan is definitely feeling it right now.
Yeah, well, it's a matter of pacing, right? It's how many lands do I need to play 1 spell per turn, and how many do I need to play 2? If I'm only going to play 1 spell per turn, I'm going to continue to have cards in my hand because I draw 1 every turn. See here, Dan setting up. We'll see what he wants to go with. He's going to activate Stirring Wildwood to hit Ashiok down to 3. It's the only way to stop Siege Rhino from happening, but it doesn't really make any progress for Dan. And Gerard is going to go ahead and use Golgari Charm to -1 all the creatures so that Ashiok goes to 4 and not 3, still leaving open the option of Siege Rhino.
Yep. And again, Gerard kind of shifting gears here, now playing a tempo game, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I'd be like, that's a very aggressive use of Golgari Charm. Dan, and this is an interesting play. He's going to go ahead and Slaughter Pact the Tarmogoyf because it puts a 6th card in his graveyard, and that will allow him to then play Tassiger post-combat. I do actually really like this play from Dan.
Yeah. This is a a reasonable way to kind of try to get back into this thing. It's a relatively efficient turn. You got Gerard to burn off a Golgaritron for not a lot of value.
Yeah, it does mean that Dan has more or less forfeited his next turn to do this. So he will have to pay for that pact. And going over to Gerard, he has Inquisition of Kozilek. We see Scavenging Ooze, Lingering Souls. And those are the ones you can take, so it's probably just Ooze. Look at all the heavy hitters here. Sorin, Siege Rhino, and Tassiger.
Yeah, and of course with the Knight of Souls Betrayal in play, the Lingering Souls is worth very little.
Gerard will lose his Ashiok to make a Siege Rhino. Dan down to 7, Gerard up to 13. That Rhino now a 3/4 from Knight of Souls Betrayal. And we have Tassiger from Gerard. See what he wants to delve. We'll give some insight into what card he wants to keep. And it looks like the only cards he's keeping in his yard are Cryptic Command and Jace, Architect of Thought. Gerard playing the Tassiger with 4 mana up. So start looting as soon as next turn.
And as you mentioned, Dan's turn is just getting consumed here. A Maelstrom Pulse off the top, and now he basically has no actions this turn.
I do find it interesting. So Gerard kept 2 non-land cards in his graveyard when he could have just done 1. He exiled a land to it. And I would think if he's going to activate Tassiger, he'd want to hand pick the card he gets back, as opposed to just giving Dan options. Flips Mana Leak and Breeding Pool off this Tassiger activation. So now Dan can choose between Cryptic Command, Jace, and Mana Leak.
A pretty tough spot. And
yeah.
Cryptic Command is actually lethal in this spot because Gerard can tap Tassiger, return the Knight of Souls Betrayal to his hand, and that's lethal coming across. It's a slightly risky play because, if Dan has a way to kill something, then you use a Cryptic Command not very efficiently. Gerard might have such a commanding advantage that he doesn't mess around with a play like that, but Cryptic is lethal.
Yeah, the only card Dan could safely give Gerard was Jace, so Gerard will get that one. Mana Leak also is pretty terrible to give.
Yep.
Gerard, though, casts Serum Visions for the turn. And pair 4/5 swing in. Tassiger can block one of them, but the other one comes across for 3.
And Gerard did have Cryptic Command. He could have gone for the kill. But again,
well, Dan would still be at 1, right? Because of Knight of Souls.
No, I'm saying you could bounce the Knight of Souls Betrayal,
yes.
Tassiger, and attack for 8. The thing is, if Dan has some weird removal spell there, then it's a really bad use of Cryptic Command. And in this spot, Dan's probably not being Cryptic Command anyway, so there's no reason to risk it, but Gerard could have tried to punch it to kill that turn.
Cryptic will counter whatever Dan does, and then Gerard should win next turn.
Right, like this is good enough too.
Counter, we'll see what the second mode is. Counter draw, sure. Sower of Temptation in Gerard's hand now. This should be enough. I think Gerard has successfully executed his tempo plan. Liliana of the Veil, he has a lot of options of dealing with Tassiger. Block here, Dan goes down to 1.
Yeah. Gerard just unwilling to take any risks here. Dan could have Path. He's just not willing. Path plus Slaughter Pact not effective here, but the point is Gerard's being extremely conservative because Gerard just has it all locked up.
And this should be it. Let's see, Dan gets one last play here. He's going to go ahead and go for Maelstrom Pulse. Would have to be on Siege Rhino. Certainly don't want to pulse the Tassigers. Gerard will allow that. And next turn, he does have a Liliana up. So Scavenging Ooze, that will get Snapcaster into Cryptic Command. And there you have it. Gerard Fabiano to 11, 1-1 is victorious again. 2-1-1 on day 2, looking to be 1 win away from the top 8.
And